Many. Here we
Well, that's okay. I can start by just taking us through the slides for a bit.
go. Or do we want to take roll call?
Yes, we need to do that. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up the slide for the agenda, which allows you to see everybody and able to do roll call. So if everyone is ready, then we will get started.
Kelly, do you want to just call the roll?
Yeah. Cheryl Drinkwater.
Here.
Wade Seals.
Here.
Carla Schneiderman.
Here.
Ken Berlin.
Here.
Alejandro Pimentel.
He's not making it tonight.
Okay. And Damian Park.
Here.
All right. Looks like we have a quorum. And as far as attendees, Carol Pacheco.
Here.
Shanita Stevenson. I see Shanita. I thought I did.
Unmute.
Oh. All right. John Calise. Hi. Hi, Shanita.
Here.
And I am here. And Prachi Amin.
Here.
Chris Marino.
Here.
And Cal Walsh.
Here.
All right. Everyone present and accounted for.
And I'm here too, Ty Albert.
Oh, I apologize for that. You're our newest member, so we'll make sure that you're added to the roll moving forward. Thank you, Ty.
Oh, yeah, no problem. And John, sorry, but John, can you just remind me, I'm not a voting member of this committee, right?
Correct. You're just the board liaison. So if the committee has any questions that they want to bring to the board, it's through you. Or if they have questions maybe for you, or if you want to update the committee on anything that we've been working on, you can do so. Sorry, I said you're just a board member, but you know what I meant.
Well, I just wanted to clarify. No, that's great. Thank you so much.
And also, he's not new.
Right.
Technically, he's been around, and you've been to a couple meetings, Ty, I believe.
Yeah, I've been the liaison to this committee a few times, but in my swan song year as board member, I wanted to make sure that I was on it one last time.
Yeah, last year we had Laura Babbitt, and now we get Ty 2.0 or 3.0.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to be here and grateful that everybody's willing to be on this committee. I mean, not willing to, but has volunteered, whatever. It's a fun committee. Thank you.
And
Thanks.
also, Ty, if I may ask, how are your parents doing?
Oh, they're doing well. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, an older relationship.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
All right, great. Well, then we can move along to approval of the agenda. The first two pages of the agenda are on this slide. The rest of the agenda is on this slide. It was also in your packet. If there are any questions or any discussion items before we vote, feel free to speak up. I would say silence is golden.
Yep, I don't hear any comments or revisions. I do not have any myself, so I propose that we approve the agenda. The first agenda, excuse me, minutes, right? Are we approving the agenda?
We are approving the agenda right now.
Yeah.
I
move we approve the agenda.
Okay, and that's a first by Chair Drinkwater and a second by Member Park.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? All right, motion passes. Okay, so now we can go to public comment. Do we have anyone on public comment?
It does not look like we have any attendees this evening.
Excellent. All right. So now we can go, oops, I'm going the wrong direction. Sorry about that, everybody. Now we're going to go to approval of the minutes. So we did have some questions about the minutes from the November 9th meeting, and Cal was willing to go back through the audio and video from that meeting and double check some of the items. Those items were highlighted in the meeting minutes for November 9th that you received in your packet. We just wanted to double check one more time that everybody was comfortable with the language and that we were all set, because we didn't vote on those last time. We'd be voting on them now. So is there any further discussion on that item?
Can you give me just one quick sec? And are we talking about, I have December 14th here.
We have two meeting minutes to approve, and we're talking about the first one, Wade.
Right.
November 9th, I believe.
That would be November 9th. Yes, sorry.
Yes, November 9th. I reviewed both. I'm comfortable to move on from that one. Yes, thank you.
All right, then it sounds like we can vote if we have a motion.
I motion that we approve the meeting minutes for November 9th.
I second.
All right, that's a first by Chair Drinkwater and a second by Member Schneiderman. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, sounds like motion passes. Thank you, everybody. And now we can go on to our more recent meeting minutes, and that was for December 14th. Are there any discussion items from the December 14th meeting minutes?
I did not see any comments. I move that we approve the meeting minutes for December 14th.
I'll second.
All right, that's a first by Chair Drinkwater and a second by Secretary Skills. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. All right. All right, so we are circling back on bylaws and the current corrections that are in the mix. And I will go ahead and yield the floor to Member Park to talk a little bit about the most recent corrections to the bylaws. But before I do so, I just wanted to check with Shanita and John to see if there was any more back and forth with legal that we needed to update on, or if we just dive right in.
I think we were good, but I will confirm that as we listen to Member Park. I did just note on the bylaws, though, we will need to amend the meeting location, since even though we're in virtual right now, it's still showing 1720 Oregon, and we'll need to update that to 1005 Parker Street in Berkeley.
I would also like to comment, you are now only 2 blocks from my house.
Well, there you go, Cheryl.
I know, I'm hoping to run into you. I walked my dog right past the building today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hopefully I'll run into you.
Oh, I'm sure we will. Hopefully you don't use your car to run into me, Cheryl.
No.
So what I can do then, Damien, is I can pull up the document for you so I can be screen sharing that instead of the slide if that works for you. Excellent.
Yes, it does. There's 2 things in there. There's 2 substantive changes. There's the secretary language, which I think Wade and Cheryl said looked fine. I believe, now stretching my memory a little bit because it's kind of 3 things I was working on, but I think they said that was fine. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl or Wade.
Our comments are in the meeting minutes, actually, from the last discussion. I would have to refer to them exactly, but they're in there. The language is in there. I think we agreed with most of it, as is.
Yeah, okay.
If not all.
Yeah, it's probably my fault for not presenting a more a nicer markup, as in one with all the garbage there. But
well, you have the meeting minutes close by, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so so I think we can move on beyond section 17 and beyond section the whatever the one with the chair's responsibilities are.
Can I ask a clarifying question on 17, Damien?
Yeah.
The way that I'm reading this is that the secretary will then be taking minutes and everything like that. Typically, that's something that the district provides.
Yeah. Down below, though, I say that.
That was good, Damien. I'll jump in real quick. That was going to be my comment, and a lot hasn't changed. But what it looks like what Damien did add was at the very end, the secretary may request aid from the district in the performance of their duties. That's what you're talking about, Damien?
Yeah, that's all it is.
That's fine. And then number 2 is about, the notices being posted and whatnot. The district would want to continue to own that just to make sure there's no issues, inadvertent issues with the Brown Act, obviously.
And also, Damien, it's on the meeting minutes from December 14th. On page 4 is sort of all of our review of these sections. It's item number 9 on page 4, duties of the chair, secretary, and we kind of commented on all of those there.
Okay. Then, yeah.
I'm just, you know, I'd have to read through it just like you would, so. Because it's been a couple months or a month.
Sorry, John, you said you need to own what part of it?
The posting of the notices, mainly for Brown Act reasons.
That would be item 2 or 3?
Item 2, I guess.
Item 2.
2.
Legally, we have to post a physical notice. We also have to post on the district's website. We have to post 72 hours prior to the meeting. These are things that staff has access to do, but to have one of the members of our committee try to own that would be very problematic. And it might not get posted in time and we'd run into Brown Act violations.
All right, so you would like a slight language alteration there, or is it okay to have, they may assign?
I'm okay with the language because it says see that. So in other words, it does add some responsibility to the secretary. I'm just pointing it out more than anything so that we're all on the same page moving forward.
Sounds good.
I'm just going to continue to scroll and let me know when you want to stop. I know that the agenda creating process is also a slide later in the meeting. So you folks can definitely choose to discuss that item now. We can skip that slide or we can discuss it when it comes up later. It's up to you.
Yeah, this one strikes me as a little more important on my end. One that, again, I think Kelly and I hashed some of this out a little bit, and I hope this is the updated version. It should be. Is that right? Kelly, does that sound right to you?
Yeah, this one was PDF'd off of the most recent Google document. So I think this should also be accurate. I'm just double checking my memory of this.
It says ASAP. So the word ASAP, I believe, was added most recently. So that's the good sign part.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. And the last item, number 4, I know we talked about the public posting, which was John's concern, and the other one too. So we clarified it here in the agenda process as well.
Right. So any comments from the rest of the committee about that? I think, I sent it, I think to Wade and Cheryl, but I don't
Yeah, I don't remember getting an email to review it, but maybe Wade does.
I reviewed it today before the meeting. So the one we're looking at on screen now.
Perfect. So let me just summarize it briefly. It's the main thing is I would like the chair to have control over the agenda unless they choose to designate to someone else on the committee, or if no member is willing, district staff to control the agenda. And clearly we'll take care of posting. Obviously, I'm not going to run afoul of the Brown Act here, but I would like us to control the agenda. I think that's a reasonable thing to, it's not reasonable. It's the foundation part of an independent committee. So that's the majority of this change here. Yeah, that's the basics of it, really.
So Damien, number 4 is problematic in the sense of it says at least 72 hours that must be sent out, and at least 72 hours in advance. By law, we have to post 72 hours in advance.
Right.
We expect district staff to be standing by to post the moment we get it. So realistically, that needs to be changed to 5 business days. And I apologize that I'm just catching that now, but that does not work. That it's an unreasonable expectation of district staff.
So would it be a good idea to have both the law of the 72 hours there as a reference, and then have the 5 business days as the working requirement for the committee? So we're always clear that we can never do it less than that.
I think so.
Okay. And I don't mind jumping into the document and making that change, Damien,
Please
and just
do,
letting
Kelly.
you know. Yeah, that's
Please do,
fine.
Kelly. Okay.
So we're at item number 4. You got it. And then I also wanted to clarify the language on item 2A here. It says district requests should occur ASAP to ensure that staff have adequate time to prepare for the next meeting. I think the district, I think that should be committee requests, right?
Committee
Because
request of the
district is
district,
staff.
correct.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, so I'll fix
yeah.
that one as well.
Yeah. That makes more sense. Okay, and there's two does there. Maybe there's
Oh yeah, I'll fix that one as well.
perfect. But are the rest of the, so besides those things, are the rest of the committee, are you okay with that more substantive change about having us draft our own agenda? That's the, I mean, any thoughts from the rest of the committee about that?
I'm very comfortable with it. I have not had a problem with the way we've created the agenda. I think I've mentioned that before, but I think this is reasonable.
Chairs will come and go, and so at least they have the option to create the agenda or defer to the district to do it. Is that what this is basically saying?
That is my understanding, yeah.
They can defer to other members, and if
Or other members, but the district, it's going to fall on the district ultimately if somebody does not act.
Right.
That's correct.
Well,
That's right.
I got to push back.
Which could happen.
I'm going to push back a little bit then on that 5 days, because the
Mhm.
reality is everyone's schedule is very full, and I understand that the CBOC knows that. But for us to find out then with 48 hours notice prior to the posting requirement, sometimes that's doable and sometimes that's not. So the way that it was set up in the past was the district knew that it always had the responsibility to do that. Now, I don't have any issue whatsoever with Member Park's desire and the committee's desire to draft your own agendas. I think that's actually a really good thing. But what I would say is for us to find out 48 hours prior to the deadline of it being posted, there are times when staff is on vacation, there are times when staff is out, there are times when staff simply doesn't have time. So
Right.
That being said, that 5 days, we would need to back that further up. If we're not going to know until the last minute if there's a possibility that someone from the CBOC can't do it, right? We would need that.
Right, so
we
you
need to
should
know that.
have notice between 5 and 7 days, whether it's on you or not.
Yeah, so let's go back real quick. I just want to make sure that we're all reading this the same way. So what I see is the first step in the process is a designee or the district staff at least 2 weeks before the next meeting would solicit any additional items from the members. So 2 weeks prior to the meeting, and if we need to adjust these times, we can. What we're proposing is 2 weeks prior to the meeting, whether it's a member or whether it is a committee member or a staff member, will have a draft agenda go out. And then it says after that, that the part where it says district should say committee members. So additional requests should happen ASAP. Any member may add items to the agenda and should do so within 1 week. So then we're saying, I still think to John's point, we need a little bit more time, but right now what we have is 2 weeks prior to the meeting, draft agenda goes out. People ask for more items to come in within a week. Now we're 1 week before the meeting, so that may be 5 business days or not. So I still think we need to push out further, but I just want to make sure that everybody's reading it the same way, that we're kind of backing into it. So if we're going to add time, we should probably add time to item 2.
Yes.
And that would make everything else back out as well. Oh, I'm sorry. It looks like Ty has his hand up.
Yeah.
Very clever.
Well, that's okay. I mean, whenever you're ready for it.
Ty, you're cutting out a little.
go ahead.
Oh, oh yeah. Well, I had a question and a comment. My question was, I forget. Do changes to this committee's bylaws go to the board for approval? John,
Yes.
do we know? They do. Okay.
We do.
So this will come as a action item for the board at some point to consider.
Yes.
Okay. I think that I also like the idea of the committee either drafting the agenda or working with staff to create the agenda. I I think that ASAP is too vague for the, I don't think the board will approve a policy that just says ASAP. And I guess a little bit more substantively, I worry about anything that would involve direction to staff that essentially comes from anyone other than the superintendent. And so the provision about anybody can put anything on the agenda. And again, this isn't anything about this particular committee, but just thinking about any possible committee down the road. An agenda item that requires something of staff. It's not necessarily just about, I mean, definitely there needs to be enough time built in, which is what I hear John saying. But it seems to me there also has to be some provision or something that says that sort of requests for action or data or something will be made like in consultation with the director of facilities, so that there's not a suggestion that someone can just any member can put on the agenda, an action item, or a discussion item that requires something from staff that either staff doesn't feel like they can or are able to do or can prioritize. So that, to me, I would be worried as a board member that gives too much authority to direct staff.
I think, Damien, that kind of plays into our conversation that we had in the document about the idea of how many items could be requested. So not even logistically, but also just if we got 7 items for the agenda, we can't cover 7 things. So maybe we need to adjust that language to Ty's point.
Right. Well, let me step in. I really feel like none of us have made hardly any requests of the district so far, and us have an incentive to ask for things that burden you, or if we ask for something that's too late, all of us are reasonable to expect that it won't be for the next meeting, but it'll be for the meeting the following, right? If we ask for it too late. I feel like the one thing, in fact, I have asked for, which is a different file version, I have not even received yet after a couple months. So now that's kind of a cheap shot, but I'm just going to put it out there anyway. So I feel like there's really, any member can add an item to the agenda is a very small request. If it happens to be that our members are adding ridiculous stuff on there that the staff can't deal with, then we can deal with that when it comes to it. But I feel like all are kind of putting so much legal burden on us, stuff that is going to kill our independence, right? For the minor benefit of preventing some minor thing, some hypothetical in the future. Right? That's kind of how I'm viewing this discussion so far.
So Damien, if I may, 2 things. One, I understand where you're coming from, but I think to Ty's point, and he can jump in on this, but as far as that none of the members here would ask anything that's unreasonable, I absolutely agree with you. But the bylaws should be written for the committee, not for the specific members, right? So I think that's a fair point. And I do want to address what you referred to as your cheap shot, because I think it is important to address, especially with Board Director Alper here, because he's not aware of this. What you've been asking for is extremely unorthodox. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, your job is to really look at the audit and determine whether or not the audit is correct. We've had legal here to explain this and everything else.
John, I asked for a spreadsheet.
Hang on.
A spreadsheet.
You're asking for us to take documents that we provide as a PDF and provide them as a spreadsheet, which again, this is nothing against you. Future committee members, right? It's very easy to manipulate spreadsheets. So for this reason, these documents have always been provided in PDF format. I don't think that's unreasonable, Damien. This is not about any specific member of a committee. This is about the committee as it's made up.
I apologize for bringing it up now. Let's push it off, get back to the
well, so I mean, so put some language around here around reasonableness and shift it, and shifting it to the next meeting if it can't be produced for the meeting that it's at the agenda that it's on. I mean, I think, I think it's easy to couch some language that makes sense then. I mean, the district can proceed with reasonable diligence to fulfill committee requests. And requests that can't be fulfilled in time for the meeting for which it is agended, or will be postponed until the next.
We're not
going to know about any given right? I mean, a piece of paper isn't going to take away district staff's ability to object to a certain document production or anything like that, right? I mean, it's just, when they're unreasonable, we'll call them as we see them.
Well, I do think that I definitely agree with John's point about the bylaws should be written in a way that can account for whatever situation may occur. That's like the point of, I think that's the point of the bylaws, is the point of like policy, essentially. I think that I wanted to ask whether you all have looked at the bylaws of the P&O committee or the parent advisory committee. I mean, we've especially the P&O committee, which is a historically sort of independent committee, but that works really closely with.
No, I don't think we've seen. I certainly haven't seen this. I don't even know what P&O stands for. Do we just lose Ty?
No.
I think we may have, yeah. I know that
Carla,
Member Schneiderman has had her hand up for quite a while.
So I guess what I'd like to say, there seem to be two issues here. One, I think whatever we decide or would prefer as the recommendation, one thing that needs to change is that, we should have a preferred final agenda at least 4 weeks before a meeting. If there's an emergency need to add something, and that would be unusual for a committee like this, I think that can be accommodated with staff, but I really think it needs to change to 4 weeks. And I mean, I've been very clear from, for several meetings now that I don't like the idea of having information in a spreadsheet that can be altered. I think we're all aware that data can be manipulated, not that anyone on this committee would do it in an inappropriate way, but data can be manipulated in ways that can be difficult. So, my preference is that we extend the time period to 4 weeks before the next meeting. And I think that may solve some of the problems we're discussing. That gives us plenty of time as a committee to have some exchange back and forth, and also gives the district a chance to take a look at our requests and to let us know whether there's going to be an issue getting data or information together. But those are just my preferences.
Four weeks is okay. I don't mind. Are we on a 6-week cycle?
Sorry, I'm on mute. We're on a 6-week cycle, yes. So 4 weeks prior to the meeting, I think would be very reasonable and would leave us with enough time to address any items.
Fine with me. Shanita? You should probably say something.
I wanted to say that we have to make sure we keep in mind that we do have some calendar items that we must do every year. So there has to be space for when our auditor comes to visit, and then we have to have space for just all of these other activities that the committee is responsible for to take place. So the goal is just to make sure that we are, that we create some sort of prioritization with the schedule for those things.
Yeah, I kind of assume this will be done in consultation with the district, like during the meeting, like someone who's going to be in charge of the agenda is going to like draft it, and folks on the district say, look, remember that next meeting we need to have the auditor, so clear a spot for him, so or her. That's kind of how I view those kind of things coming into play here.
Yeah, and I believe that would fall under Ken's recommendation to have a quote unquote reasonable standard for addressing agenda items, right? Because if we have to have the auditor here, then that's reasonable, and then we wouldn't do some other things, right?
And
all right, so change to 4 weeks, and then item 3. Let's get back to item 3. I still push back against.
If I may, one, there was a question as far as P&O. P&O is planning an oversight for BSEP, which is our largest parcel tax. But the other is, I think, for those who might not have seen it, Ty did just drop a comment in the chat for everyone. And I think it is important to notice, because we do have to remember that the bylaws do need to go to the board for approval, and we are getting feedback from one of our board members here. So I think that's very helpful, and thank you, Ty.
Yeah, sorry, I know I shouldn't just be using the chat, but I'm on my phone and I just dropped off. But again, like I know that it's hard to separate out like the current committee members from a future committee, but I think it can't be that we know that, of course, we'll work with district staff to do these agendas if the bylaws themselves, as I'm reading this, don't have any role for the district staff. I know you're talking about just saying the word reasonable. I don't think it's just my one board member's opinion, but I don't think that wouldn't satisfy the concern that I have, because as it's written, this gives what looks like unilateral authority to the chair and the members of the committee. And so I know that this committee would do it in conjunction with John and Shanita, but a future committee could look at these bylaws and very easily say, it doesn't matter what you say, John. This says any board member can add anything to the agenda. And I think I think it's bad policy, and I think it's problematic. And so I think I would encourage you to look at these other models that talk about working with district staff in the bylaws themselves. And again, P&O is a great model because they're very independent, but they work closely with staff.
Two things. So one, it strikes me that we are tasked in the rest of by the Ed Code, we're tasked with upholding the Ed Code that, of what we're supposed to do. So therefore, we're not going to just like skip the important things we're supposed to do. And then so it makes sense to work in consultation with the staff. Otherwise, we're not doing our job. But in terms of number 3, I still don't see why any of us can't add. In other words, why can't any member add something to the agenda that they want to discuss? It doesn't strike me. I mean, I'd like to hear from the rest of the members about this. I don't see why any of us on this committee would ever be barred from adding something to the agenda. Unless you think it's like we're gonna add something like, I don't know, like watch a random YouTube video. Obviously, I mean, that's I mean, do you want bylaw language that disbars like idiotic things like that? Is that what you're worried about?
Why would we be able to just word it as simply as the committee shall coordinate with staff to create the agenda?
Yeah, what Wade said is what I was thinking, that staff is just, I mean, that's very similar to the P&O language. And I think would make a big difference.
We really do need the staff to coordinate, and in fact, they have been creating the agenda, and we've been, from my perspective, we've been able to jump in and add things to it. I don't think that's been a problem. But as mentioned, I think Kelly mentioned it, there are things on the agenda that we may not know about that are required to be on the agenda. So obviously we need to coordinate the agenda with the staff, so.
Yeah, if I may, and I've mentioned this at other meetings, the way that the board does it is at board meetings, if there's particular things that a board member would like to follow up on, they'll oftentimes ask during the meeting. If not, they usually coordinate with the board president, and from there it goes to the superintendent. That strikes conversation with the superintendent or perhaps staff below, like superintendent will come to me sometime and say, hey, the board wants this. Can we produce this, and how long will it take? It's that coordination, and that was the system that we had in place actually prior to doing the rewrite. So we would get the requests from the chair, and the district would respond accordingly. And I don't believe there's ever been a single request denied. I know there hasn't been since I've been here for over 3 years, and I don't believe there was prior to that. So we're sort of recreating the wheel, but I think what we're finding is that we're having to go back to something that's very similar to or the exact same system. By the board, by the district creating the agenda, we meet all the statutory requirements. Those statutory requirements deal specifically with what Ed Code says. Well, you're saying no, Damien, but we're meeting.
No, but John, it's not. The whole point is to further our role, not to worry about satisfying these minor, like these details. The point of us is to be able to do what we're supposed to do, but and not be hamstrung.
Damien, your role, you just said right there about your point is to further your role. We've had this conversation. Your role is clearly defined by Ed Code. Your role is to basically evaluate the independent audit and to report to the community. if we have spent bond funds in accordance with bond language and with the law.
Right.
That's the role of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. I've spoken to every member on the committee, and you as well individually, and the committee as whole about this. To take your role bigger than that.
But I'm
right?
not doing that, John.
An
independent committee.
I'm not going to argue.
Okay, I don't mean to expand my role. I said I want to do our role, and I think an independent committee has controlled the agenda vested with us. And if we run afoul of something in the future, let's worry about that in the future. But I think the bylaws saying we have control of the agenda is a real minor thing, and allowing us to add anything to the agenda allows us to control our meetings. That's all I'm asking for. It's independent committee at the very basic must have an ability. I mean, point 3 seems so uncontroversial to me, and yet now I'm getting a lot of pushback there, which strikes me as that we're not furthering, we're not allowing us to do our work.
Well, I think we're allowing you to do your work by providing you everything that you ask for, as well as everything that we're required to give. But I think Director Alper was very clear in the sense of an independent citizens committee shouldn't be directing staff, right? There's the request for information, and we can absolutely provide that for you. But the way this document is set up, you would be directing staff. And Ty, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, I also just think that it can be. I mean, I hear where you're coming from, Damien, and I just think we have some really good models in the district that if there's a feeling on the committee that the committee members haven't had enough of a role in the creation of the agenda, then I'm not sure why the language that I put in the chat from the P&O committee wouldn't be sufficient, but I just would be very wary of, and as just one board member I don't think I could support a committee that had the bylaw language that directed the directed staff like this. And as I think Wade pointed out, it's with all the sort of statutory requirements and everything, it's just bad policy. I think staff has to have an explicit role in the creation of the agendas. It doesn't mean that the citizen members of the committees can't also have an explicit role, but staff has to have an explicit role in the creation of the agendas for a BUSD committee, a Brown Act committee. They just have to.
It's not. We're not one of those, by the way. I mean, so I take issue. I mean, that's why I think we're different. I don't want to keep. If the rest of the anyway,
you're not different than the P&O committee. It's very similar. It's very similar to the parent advisory committee. I mean, we have a number of citizen advisory committees that are Brown Act committees, all of which involve staff in the creation of the agendas. It seems like a solution that overwhelms whatever the problem is. But I've said my piece. I think you understand where I'm coming from.
Damien?
Wade's had his hand up. Go ahead, Wade.
I would love it if we could move on to what we're really supposed to do. And let's put this, Damien, do you mind if we have a look at the P&O committee bylaws, and maybe you and I just, I do think-
I don't mind. Let's push it off, and I'm going to review whether or not, because I think Ty's not, anyway, let's review it. So later.
Coordinating is important, and we should make that language work into this change. So that way we can move on to what we're really supposed to be doing. And Damien, I really do appreciate what you're trying to do, and I understand that there's a need for that. So I'm not pushing back on it. I just think we need, anyway.
No worries, and it'd be okay if you did. But anyway, we'll talk for after later, I guess, offline.
So this item is to be continued.
Sure.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the next item. Is that if I look at the agenda, I believe we are looking at item 7.
All right, here we go. All right, this is item 7. I'm still on item 5, it looks like, because we also have the guidelines discussion.
Okay.
Is the committee wanting to skip that one too, or just the bylaws? I just want to be clear on what the next item is.
I am curious where you are right now is where I think we should go. That's my personal opinion. We should, because I'm not quite clear on what this is. I understand what this is, but look, should we review this quickly?
Yeah,
yes.
This is
Kelly, you lost audio.
Yes, I know. I'm yelling at my family on mute. Sorry about that. These are the guidelines. These are not the bylaws. These are the working guidelines that were being drafted for practices that you as a committee may want to take part in. So this was a separate document that was drafted back in November. So I can share this document and we can go over that. Before I do that, I just want to let everybody know that we are cut pasting the items that are covered in the chat so that we can distribute those as part of the meeting minutes. So don't feel like you have to track the chat right now. We will be doing that. So before we move, I want to make that clear, and I can pull up these guidelines if you guys would like.
I'm wondering if we need to defer these and discuss them all at the same time, because I'm not sure, whether there's any specific discussion about the guidelines. And honestly, I haven't done any additional work on, a policy beyond what we discussed in the last meeting for community inquiries. So, I think maybe those things go together with the agenda discussion that we just finished about how we handle that as a committee. I think those, all these three things are, they're interdependent. Let me put it that way.
Maybe now would be a great time for staff to give us their thinking on this, so that between now and the next, if this is on the next agenda, I agree, maybe we should put this off, but is there something we should contemplate in the meantime?
Well, one minor point is that in the chat is a link to the new one. The one that was on the agenda, I apologize for not catching that. It's not the updated version though. So the one I sent out is, I think, a lot newer than that.
Actually, if it wasn't, Kelly, correct me.
Yeah, right.
If the model, I mean, the document that was submitted and posted, we can't discuss an updated version.
I don't believe we can, but just to be clear, if there was an updated version and it got sent to anybody at the district, if it could be resent, I would greatly appreciate it. My understanding is these items have been writing since November, and we've talked about them and then said, okay, we're going to talk more next week. So we've continually attached that same initial discussion item. So if there are new versions of the document, and if that can be sent to staff, that would be greatly appreciated.
It's all in the chat right now. Everyone can click on that link and just double check. I think if that will take you to a draft. It says 12/20. We don't have to discuss it, but you can see
I understand. We can take
December
note
20th.
of the link. Yes, we can take note of the
So
link.
we
for
can
future.
take note of it. So then I go back, I digress to, I think we're on item number 7.
All right. Thank you. Capital projects log. Okay, hold on one moment and I will pull that up. I will tell folks that there has been little to no change, if I am not mistaken. Chris, if you could let us know if there have been any significant changes. I'm going to pull it up so that we can view it.
You're correct. Little to no change. The only thing was the Rosa Parks project, as the legacy portion of that has been coming in for approval. That's the most change that we've had as of late.
So this was part of your packet. If you have any questions regarding the active construction or the change order numbers, please let us know. I'm happy to scroll too if someone needs me to. All right, no questions. I'm going to go ahead and go on then. The request from the last meeting, when we gave some information about delivery methods, we were asked to provide information on the various projects and what delivery methods they would have. So this is a quick rundown of the board approved projects as they stand and the delivery methods that they would be using. And as everyone might remember, in the last meeting, we talked about leaseback, design build, design bid build, and government code. Your government code 4217, your quick cliff notes on that is design build is the methodology where you have your architect and your contractor on one team working together from the beginning. Your design bid build is the traditional hard bid project, and your leaseback is a design and then a partner, a general contractor is picked upon best value and qualifications and comes in a little earlier in the process. It's not a traditional hard bid. So anyway, I just wanted to give that quick rundown of the different delivery methods to refresh your memory, and then feel free to ask us questions if you have any questions about these particular delivery methods with these given projects.
Kelly, I have a question. This is Cheryl Drinkwater. The Little Theater, is that, I see that's lease back. Is that part of the same or a subset of the contract for the Berkeley Community Center, since they're technically the same building?
And they are separate projects though. And as John mentioned in the last meeting, the Little Theater has some significant issues at the design side and might require a lot of additional funding. So we're really looking hard at that project and whether or not it's going to be feasible considering the requirements that the division of the state architect is going to put on us as far as structural upgrades.
Wow.
It's really increasing the budget on that project. So while we've done some initial design, we're dealing with both funding availability and requirements of the state right now to decide what will be viable at that project and will not be. If it were to take place, it would be a leaseback, but we have a lot of thinking to do on that. And I don't know, John, if I got all that or if you want to add on.
No, you absolutely captured that right. You know, the initial design work, the schematic design we had to do to begin a lot of the conversations with the state. But in these pre-design meetings, what they've alluded to they're going to want to see is making it almost cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
So they're working with the state to try to capture additional funding. The problem is even if we qualify for the additional funding, which we should, unless another state bond is passed, it will not be funded because they're out of money.
What would be the alternative?
A lot of moving parts to this.
John?
Sorry?
Sorry, what would be the alternative if it's not feasible to upgrade? Or, you know,
project won't get done.
No, I know, but would they close it and just would never be occupied, or would it get used as is? You know,
it would be used as is unless the board feels that it shouldn't be. Right? There's nothing from a structural aspect right now that says you can't use it. The issue is the minute that you try to touch anything in there, you will be forced to do an entire seismic and ADA upgrade, no longer on the Little Theater, but on the entire building. So the current Berkeley Community Theater project, what that deals with is the classroom wing and the stage box. That does not deal with the lobby, the atrium, or the 3,500 seat house.
Oh, wow.
Realistically, you'd be spending more to do that house than what we're spending on the classroom.
On the whole project.
Plus for the Little Theater.
Kind of thought the Little Theater might be a little bit of a thorn.
Yeah, it's a little bit messy. We have really the expert for seismic mitigation funding, Matt Petler. He's one of the top people in the state working on this with us, working with Department of General Services, the Office of Public School Construction, as well as the Division of State Architect, the alphabet soup that is Sacramento, right? So we are working on it and we're trying to capture everything we can. But until we know where the state lands on another state bond, and if that bond passes, again, even if we do manage to qualify for all of the funding, which we should, there's no funding for it. So it's basically, it would be unfunded. It would be approved but unfunded with the state.
And as an oversight committee, it's also important to note that we're being very mindful about how we're spending money on that project with consultants and moving forward so that we're not investing bond dollars in something that may falter in the end. So I think it's important to know that that's conversations that staff have regularly is, you know, do we want to move forward with this or not and spend any more money until we make these decisions? So we are being mindful of that investment.
That sounded like it came through pretty loud and clear with John's comments.
Yeah, but no, I think, well, thank you, Cheryl. But to Kelly's point, like normally as soon as schematic design is done, we move right into design development. We've actually told the architects and all the other designers to press pause. We're working on the documents we need to try to capture more state funding, but that's it. We don't want them racking up, you know, basically running the till on their design development and everything else is until we know for sure where we're going to stand with funding.
Well, it's the little theater. It's not the main community theater.
Yeah, it's the little theater, but the challenge is that programmatically, it's what's really needed. Unfortunately, DSA dropped this on us at the last minute.
Oh, okay.
The architect, when we had gone through all the other meetings, from pre-con all the way to approval for the community theater at the house, or excuse me, the classroom wing and the stage box, there was never mention of this. And it's the same folks at the table. Got it.
Is there any avenue to have them rethink their position on that?
No, it's their interpretation of the regs, and I've worked it all the way up to the head for the Oakland office, and they're holding fast on this. And here's the thing: I wouldn't argue in the sense of that the work that they're suggesting, it does need to be done. The problem is how do we pay for it?
They'd rather it sit in its current condition and forever to be unused.
Well, I won't hypothesize as to what their thinking is, Wade, right? But what I would say is that's the alternative, is that it either sits or it gets redone.
It was rhetorical, really, but yes, right.
Well, if there aren't any other questions about that, can you comment on the access control point for the Milvia Gate project?
Damien had his hand up.
Oh,
it's about something else, so go ahead.
Oh yeah, I just was wondering if you could comment on the access control point at Berkeley High, the Milvia Gate project.
Sure. That's just a small portable, basically the smallest portable they make. It's office sized. Chris Moreno may remember the exact size, but that was a request from the high school really to control the inflow during COVID. So calling it originally, I think internally we referred to it sort of as the COVID shack. That's not its official name. But it's really about, Berkeley High is an open campus, and particularly when we were having to do the self-attestations, but now as we're having to do testing and things like that, we really needed to be able to put our safety officers somewhere where they're not necessarily standing in the rain. So we have a mobile modular small portable out there right
So
now.
Is that budgeted amount, 100,000, is that more of a time factor than a cost factor?
It is.
Okay.
It is. That included, I'd have to go back and look, or Chris may remember, but that included basically the setup, because we did have to have delivery, bring electrical to it, et cetera. And then so many months of the lease, which is what the contract was for. Chris, do you by chance remember how long the lease was for off the top of your head?
I'd have to go back and look.
Okay.
But yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
But let's say a year. That would be reasonable to think. I mean, for that price tag.
Yes, and we are rethinking that. Part of my responsibilities, in addition to facilities, is co-managing our COVID response team and our COVID testing team. So we meet weekly, and we're sort of talking to the high school too about, is there going to be an ongoing need for this, and so on and so forth. So obviously anywhere that we don't have to expand these expenditures, we won't.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Damien, would you like to go ahead?
I was curious if you're for item number 3, would you be able to would it run afoul of the bond language if you purchased existing spots or leased existing spots from another entity that owns parking? That wouldn't run afoul of it, would it? Of the bond language?
Can you say that again? I apologize, Damien.
Yeah. In other words, instead of building your own parking structure, could you buy someone else's parking from them, or at least like a 30-year lease or a 50-year lease or something like that? That expenditure wouldn't run afoul of Measure G, would it?
No, it would not.
Okay.
Obviously, leasing property is the least favorite thing to do, just because of the return on investment. It's not there, but we absolutely have the flexibility in the bond language to do that.
Okay. I think you should lease. Just to clarify where I'm coming from, the city has 500 spaces in their parking garage, and they're empty, and they've been empty. It'd be great to lease them instead of building 200 of our own, which is about 1/8 of a mile away. It'd be great to. Have you considered leasing those from the city instead? The Center Street parking garage, which had.
We have. There's an incredible need, obviously, for parking, as you know. There's also a need for tennis courts at the high school. And we're actually looking at that project as we're working with our designer, our bridging architect right now, to try to say, okay, is there a way that we can build this but make it even more efficient? So in other words, what other uses could we possibly house there? So we are looking at different things.
But you have not looked into leasing the Center Street parking garage spaces?
We have, and cost-wise, we did a cost analysis on it about a year and a half ago, I think. And based on the prices from the city, it was a very, very short time in which we would meet what we were paying to build it. The city is unable to discount, even if I lease that entire garage, they're unable to discount it even so much as $1 because of the bond language that they use to build the Center Street garage.
Right, I've heard, yeah, okay.
All right, any other questions on delivery methods or items on the list?
I am, well, yeah, I'm a little curious. We are reviewing what's happening now, projections, and I don't see in here, our last meeting, we learned that you guys moved out of Oregon Street and you were moving elsewhere, and that was going to rearrange priorities and some expenditures. Is there any update on that? Or is this the time for that conversation?
No, I think it's a good question. I think the timing is appropriate. The update is, so we did find, we were able to locate and actually already move into an office building in Berkeley. That took care of all of our office staff. We have temporarily relocated all of maintenance and grounds to operate out of the adult school. The only operations that continue at Oregon Street right now, or Russell Street, are the warehouses and the print shop. And the reason for that is we have nowhere to move them. We're currently negotiating a lease for a receptor facility for all of the other operations, meaning maintenance and grounds. They can't stay at the adult school. It's a very short-term fix. And we still need a nutrition services warehouse, a purchasing warehouse, and a print shop. We are working to negotiate a lease, but at the same time, not wanting to put all of our eggs into one basket, so to speak, we're also continuing to look for other lease options, just because there's been a lot of back and forth with this lease, but it does appear that this one will go through. This facility that we're working on is in Richmond. It's the closest thing that we've found. But again, it's not set in stone. We don't know for sure that we're going there. And until the lease is signed, I won't say for sure where we're going.
So you're yet to determine how that move has shifted priorities looking ahead and
Sure.
shifted dollars for those priorities, right?
Yeah, we're working through that on the cash flow, but we're also thinking about what the long-term plans are. I'll be meeting with the superintendent next week, and then possibly a few of our board members, and then go to subcommittee. As there's a couple of options that we've been asked to look at. We have vetted those. And then there are other options that we've actually found beyond rebuilding Oregon and Russell Street, which would come in the tune of about $45 to $60 million. So we've actually found another option that would show a significant savings, but I will not talk about that here today, only because the superintendent and the board doesn't even know about it yet. So that more information on that would be forthcoming.
I've heard the Little Theater is available. Thank you.
That's funny.
Well, at least their funding is. Damien, do you still have your hand up for a new item, or is it from the old one? Oh, okay, thank you. All right, anything else? All right. Okay, so this is committee comments. Any follow-up questions or any items that we didn't cover that you would like to discuss?
I do. I am curious how projects are determined, how your priorities are determined, decided. Is it I mean, I understand there would be like safety issues that would trigger something, or whether your student body grows or diminishes would I'm sure. But I'm just curious, is more or less per student, the value per student, or is there? I mean, what drives the decisions on which projects you guys put in front of other projects? That's a really big question, but I am curious about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, John, if you want to touch on it lightly, or if that is something we'd want to prepare for a future meeting agenda. You know, we could certainly get into more detail with it in a future meeting too.
Let me touch on it real quick, and then we can at the next meeting actually provide some documentation. So there was a committee that included some community members, some board members, superintendent, my predecessor, and then I came into it to really go through. The first thing that happens is you have the facilities needs assessment done and the facilities master plan. And what the needs assessment does is it actually looks at every piece of equipment, every piece of a building envelope, and every square inch of every campus. And that actually determines what the infrastructure needs are. From that, there's also a facilities master plan, and the master plan is done with community input. It's done with school input. It's done based on growth, based on needs, different types of classrooms, et cetera. And then, so now you have this pot that's this big, right? And you understand your bonding capacity is this big. And that's where the group sort of came together and said, okay, these are the priorities. These are the things that we have to do. And with that, then we went back and we worked with HY Architects, the folks who did our master plan and our needs assessment, and said, okay, how do we do this over 10 years? Because it's not as simple as saying this project, this project, this project all go first, because we have on our bond, we do sales every 2 years based upon the tax rate, because we've made commitments to this community to never exceed a tax rate of, I haven't said this figure in like 2 years, but I want to say it's $176.30, $176.30 per $100,000 of assessed value, right? So when we do the issuances, we have to be very careful to always stay below that. So understanding that and understanding what each issuance will change the tax rate to as old bonds are paid off, that determines when projects can actually fit into the 10-year cycle. Does that make sense? And when we prepare a document for you, Wade, we can bring back some internal documents that we already have, and we can share that with you, the 10-year plan. And I think it'll really kind of highlight for you how to, basically it's a long list of projects. It's dollar amounts of those projects in that year. And then in the out years, it shows the escalation of those projects. And that's how we determine what year the project gets done. And sometimes we have to flip them. Where it gets really tricky is when we have an issue like plant ops come up, right? Plant ops has come up. We know that we need to find more money. Well, how do we do that? You know, there were what we refer to as marquee projects first. Marquee projects were called out specifically in the bond language because they were a commitment to the community to do, right? And some of those marquee projects are actually the modernization of Sylvia Mendez, the parking structure with the tennis courts above, et cetera. You have those marquees. Then you have other projects that came out of the facility master plan. And then you have a large bulk of money that goes to infrastructure. And the infrastructure is really about safe, warm, and dry. It's about systems operating. It's about keeping the buildings maintained, not from a maintenance aspect, but about replacing windows, replacing roofs, replacing all the mechanical systems, et cetera. Those fall into the bond dollars. So it's really a juggling act, and the bond planning is designed to be, by nature, it's very fluid. So we're constantly looking at our bond planning saying, okay, if we move this up a year, what does it do? If we move it out a year, what does it do? If I need X million dollars to do something now that's just come up, where do we get that money from? How does it impact that? And one of the things that we're looking at really hard, and Chris Moreno has been leading the charge on this, and he's doing a great job, but is picking apart the facilities needs assessment to say, okay, the infrastructure came in is, and I'm going to use arbitrary numbers because I don't remember exact, I apologize, but the infrastructure came in at 320 million. We can't allocate the entire bond to infrastructure. Well, we know that through our maintenance programs and our preventative maintenance, we can actually stretch a lot of those out years, right? So instead, we'll allocate 170 million. And we picked it apart and we said, we don't have to replace a roof at a 20-year lifespan just because it's the lifespan when we know we're going to go 30 years on that roof, et cetera. So what Chris has now been doing is sort of further digging into that infrastructure list based on the initial observations that we found and our initial findings and decisions of what percentage we needed to allocate, and see if we can stretch that any further. Because the goal is always to actually, when we have a project like plant ops that we're faced with, it's how do we find this money without it being detrimental to the other projects on the project list? Because the last thing we want to do is tell a school, hey, you're not getting your modernization, or you're not getting your new windows that have been leaking for 10 years, et cetera. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm sure it's a huge job, and I have a lot of respect for what you guys do and how you do it. I am curious, and I think maybe we should put this on the agenda for next time, something like, let's say, Oxford, which is maybe a liability now, I don't know, and I don't know if that has any impact on bond dollars, but it's, as that Oxford campus dilapidates and it's owned by the district, you guys are going to have to think about how to fix that stuff. Something's going to have to be done, right?
Cut it loose.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, there are some internal conversations happening about that between myself and the superintendent, as well as I believe several board members and the superintendent, at least one that I know of. And the superintendent and I have discussed trying to bring this back to the board in the spring for a decision. I will also tell you that when we spoke about this, the superintendent and I spoke about this in December, about bringing it to the board, in the early spring to have this conversation, we both had deja vu. And the reason for that, because we both realized we had the exact same conversation last December. Unfortunately, COVID has just taken over all of our time, right? So it's these things that it's an absolute issue, and it's something that we do have to deal with. But I share that with you so you understand it's not something that we're not thinking about. It's always on our mind. It's just really about capacity. And it's about the capacity of the board as well.
So Ty has his hand up.
Oh yeah, thanks. Just I think Wade's question is a really good one, and I think it'd be great to put this on an agenda. And you kind of you ran through it, John. I think from my perspective as someone who was involved in that whole process, I think it'd be really important for this committee to see kind of what went into that, particularly around the prioritization of things, because that was I think in your question, Wade, sort of how do you what metrics do you use? Is it per student or whatever? And the board, but also this group of community stakeholders that John mentioned, went through this really long process during the facilities planning master plan process to identify, I forget now what they were, like 5 or 6 criteria, things like equity, safety, seismic issues, equity across schools, equity among students, technology, and kind of defined those and then scored each of the needs in the needs assessment, so that there was, and then the board ultimately voted on the plan, but also voted on pieces of it along the way. And so because just like this committee, like the board is just 5 people, and it's a lot of money. And so I think it's important to kind of understand how the prioritization got developed. And part of it was through multiple meetings at the school sites. I think there was a meeting at every school site. And then of course, things come up like Oregon Street, like John said, that force us to kind of reconfigure things. But the basic sort of building blocks of how the bond money was going to be spent and in what priority order was ultimately decided by the board after this really extensive, sort of rigorous, multi-year, expensive, frankly, process that I think would be great to kind of, not to walk through in like minute detail, but I'm sure, John, you can provide some of the, like you said, some of the internal documents that we used during that process to give people a sense of kind of what went into it.
Yeah, I absolutely can. And what I'd like to do is, because I came in halfway through the planning process, is if we're going to do this for the next meeting, we'll prepare some documents, but I'm also going to invite in Marcus Hibser. He's the principal architect of HY Architects, and he actually ran the process. He helped the superintendent and the board develop the criteria, again, prior to me. So I think it would be great to have him as a guest at our meeting, so that if there are any questions that predate me, he can certainly answer them.
That would be great. Thank you.
Excellent. New agenda item for the next meeting. All right. So now we need to do the approval of your resolution to continue with remote meeting. So before I ask for a vote, are there any questions about the resolution? It's the same resolution that you've looked at in the past, just with different dates, but I will give opportunity for questions if there are any. Oh, and I'm sorry, Ty, you still have your hand up. Do you want it up or was that a mistake?
Sorry.
That's okay. All right, any questions about the resolution?
Can we meet in person? Are we do we have a plan to do that, or?
We would absolutely love to do that. Right now, the district has actually shifted every meeting back to virtual. Yeah. Even our executive cabinet meetings got moved because of the Omicron variant. So believe me, as soon as we can move back to in person, we will. I think everyone on this call is really done with Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
I missed the snacks. That's two funny ones, right?
That's two, Wade. You're on.
I'm just cracking up over here in my own Zoom universe.
Thank you, thank you. I'll be back for the next one too.
All right. Well, then I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the resolution.
I so move.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. That is a first by member Schneiderman and a second by member Berlin. All in favor?
Wait, was it Wade or Berlin?
I was Wade.
Oh, I'm sorry, Wade. Sorry, that is a second by member Seals. I think that Ken moved a little bit and I heard a sound, and so I thought it was him.
Sorry. I thought it was as well, so that's okay.
All right, sounds good. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Fantastic. All right, so we will see everybody in March. Again, site visits, we are just tracking to Damien's point. As soon as we're able to visit sites and meet in person, we'll just keep tracking that item. But we'll see everybody in March, and we will have a presentation on how we select bond projects. This staff will send out a draft agenda for you guys to add on to, and we'll look forward to seeing you then.
Can I just, on the agenda item, we also, I think Damien and I are going to work on that. So if we could bring that back around again, unfortunately, but hopefully for the last time.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. So we would be pushing the bylaws and the guidelines. And then what I would ask for that is, I know that there is an ongoing Google Doc for guidelines that can continue to be used, but go ahead and ping staff. That can be myself and John, and let us know when you've updated, and the same with guidelines. And I would ask that you do not distribute it to everybody on the committee so we don't violate the Brown Act, but whoever's working on it, just go ahead and send it over to us so we have the most updated versions. And if you have questions between now and then, let us know.
I should have asked Damien. Damien, are you cool with that for the next meeting?
Yeah, I'll reach out to you and we'll meet next week.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you all.
See you soon.
Have a great evening.